The checkpoint didn't exist, but 12 soldiers were sent to find it anyway. And when they came back, something came back with them. One by one, they started to vanish. Not on the highway, not in the desert, but from locked rooms on a secure military base where disappearing should have been impossible. This is Battleground Times, and before we go any further, hit that subscribe button right now, because what you're about to hear is something the military tried to bury for almost 2 decades. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from, because this story spans the entire country, and you need to hear every word. Highway 375 runs through Lincoln County, Nevada like a scar. The locals call it the Extraterrestrial Highway. UFO tourist traps line the road every 50 meters. Little green men on billboards. Alien jerky at gas stations. The kind of place that feels like someone's elaborate joke. But in March 2007, a routine military convoy discovered that some jokes aren't funny. The convoy consisted of 4 Humvee vehicles carrying 12 soldiers and standard supply equipment. The mission was simple. Drive north from Nellis Air Force Base, deliver equipment to a forward operations team near the town of Rachel, turn around and come back, 8 hours round trip. Nothing complicated, nothing dangerous, just another day in the desert. The convoy commander was a young lieutenant with combat logistics experience. His second in command was a sergeant with 2 deployments under his belt, 38 years old, voice like gravel. The kind of Enko who kept soldiers in line without raising his voice. The driver was a 22-year-old corporal from Vermont. Quiet kid, steady hands, had a nervous habit of clicking his tongue against his teeth when he concentrated. In the second vehicle rode a 19-year-old private. Farm kid from Idaho, big grin, asked questions about everything. Good soldier who wanted to do things right. These details matter because these men would soon be caught in something that defied every regulation, every training manual, every logical explanation they'd ever been taught. The convoy left Nellis at 6 in the morning. The briefing had been standard. 3 checkpoints marked on the official map. Alpha, Bravo, and Rachel. Standard procedure called for punching a card at each stop. Confirming position. The morning was cold in that desert way that makes you forget summer exists. Clear sky. Mountains purple in the distance. Air so dry it pulled moisture from your lungs. The vehicles rolled out in convoy formation, 50-meter spacing. Radios on. Highway 375 stretched ahead, empty and endless. The first hour passed without incident. Flat road, empty land. The hum of engines and the crackle of radio checks. Everything normal, everything routine, everything exactly as it should have been. A small concrete structure with a faded flag. A bored soldier stepped out with a clipboard. The convoy stopped, confirmed their roster, got their cards punched. The soldier told them it was a straight shot to Bravo. About 45 minutes. Nothing between here and there but lizards and conspiracy theories. He grinned like he'd made that joke 100 times. They grinned back. That's what you do. They rolled on. The sun climbed higher. The heat started building. The sergeant pulled out the official map and studied it, tracing routes with his finger. The map showed their route with a red line. 3 checkpoints marked in blue. Alpha, Bravo, the Rachel. The Rachel checkpoint marker looked darker than the others, like it had been added after the fact. The paper felt wrong, too crisp, too fresh. It smelled like ink, fresh ink, like it had just come out of a printer that morning. They reached checkpoint Bravo at 8:20. Another small structure, another soldier with a clipboard, another punch card. The soldier told them the next stop was Rachel checkpoint about 20 miles north. New station that just went operational last week. The lieutenant asked what Rachel was. The soldier shrugged, said it was a checkpoint same as this one. Said a guy named Kowalski was running it. The convoy rolled north, 20 miles through desert that felt bigger than geography. The sergeant kept studying the map. After a while he spoke carefully, said the map felt strange, too new. Maps don't feel like this, he said. They feel broken in. This one smells like ink. The lieutenant agreed it looked crisp, too crisp. The blue checkpoint markers looked darker than the rest of the print. Probably a new print run, the lieutenant said. Supply gets weird sometimes. But the sergeant didn't put the map down. He kept staring at it like it might confess something. The radio crackled. All vehicles coming up on Rachel checkpoint. Eyes open. Standard procedures. They drove forward slowly. 30 miles per hour, every set of eyes looking for the checkpoint. A structure, a flag, a vehicle, anything, nothing appeared. They passed the exact mileage marker where Rachel checkpoint should have been according to the map. They kept going another half mile, then another. Still nothing. The sergeant leaned forward, hands on the dashboard. "Lieutenant, we passed it. There's nothing there." The convoy pulled to a stop. Dust settled around the tires. The lieutenant keyed the radio. "All vehicles hold position. Do you see a checkpoint?" The response came back. "Negative, sir. Nothing but dirt." The lieutenant stepped out into the heat. It hit him like a physical thing. The sergeant climbed out beside him, map in hand. The map clearly showed Rachel checkpoint at these coordinates. Blue marker, clear as day. But there was nothing there, just empty desert. The lieutenant radioed Nellis Base, requested confirmation on Rachel checkpoint status. The radio hissed with static. Then a voice came through, distant and clipped. "Stand by." They stood in the sun, waiting. The radio crackled again. "Nellis Base came back on. No record of Rachel checkpoint in your area. Confirm your position and proceed to final destination. Blue marker 20 miles north of checkpoint Bravo. Request clarification." Another pause. Longer this time. Then the response. "Negative on Rachel checkpoint. No such station exists or has been authorized in that grid. Proceed to destination." The sergeant stared at the map in his hands. "It's right here," he said quietly. The lieutenant acknowledged the radio transmission. They would proceed to destination, but the map sat between them like a question with no answer. Hissed if they needed to scout the area. The lieutenant told him to stay put. The sergeant walked in a small circle, eyes on the dirt, looking for something, anything. The corporal leaned out the vehicle window. Maybe they moved it. The sergeant's response was immediate. "Checkpoints don't move. They're fixed positions." The private shifted his weight. "Sir, what does that mean?" The lieutenant said it meant there was no checkpoint, but the map showed it clearly. The lieutenant said the map was wrong. The sergeant's voice had an edge now. "Maps go through multiple checks. Someone drew this marker. Someone printed it. Someone issued it." The lieutenant insisted it was a mistake, but neither of them believed it. They climbed back into the vehicles. The convoy rolled north, but the map sat on the sergeant's lap like a question that wouldn't die. The lieutenant reached over and touched the blue marker with his finger. His fingertip came away clean, but he swore he smelled something. Just a hint. "Ink, ink, fresh ink. You smell that?" he asked. The sergeant leaned over and sniffed the map. He frowned. "Yeah, like a printer just spit this out." "Maps don't smell like that," the lieutenant said. "No," the sergeant agreed. "They don't." They drove in silence. The radio stayed quiet. The corporal clicked his tongue once, caught himself, stopped. The sun moved higher, shadows got shorter, and the desert pressed in from all sides. The lieutenant kept thinking about the checkpoint that wasn't there, about the map that smelled like ink, about the voice on the radio that said no such station exists. Mistakes happen, sure, but this felt like a different kind of mistake. They passed a sign. Rachel 15 miles, not the checkpoint. The town. Rachel, Nevada is a tiny spot famous for being near Area 51, UFO tourism capital. Every building has alien murals. Every shop sells conspiracy theories next to beef jerky. The sergeant suggested they stop, ask around about the checkpoint. The lieutenant hesitated. Orders said deliver supplies and return. 5 minutes, the lieutenant decided. They would ask, then leave. The convoy rolled into Rachel just before noon. The town looked exactly like you'd expect. One main road, a few buildings, dust, alien kitsch everywhere. The little inn sat at the center. A small restaurant with a UFO painted on the roof. A couple cars in the lot. An old man smoking on the porch. The lieutenant and sergeant walked into the restaurant. The interior was dim and cool, a relief from the sun. Model spaceships. A waitress behind the counter looked up and smiled. 60-something, bleached hair, lipstick like a red shout. "Name tag," said Pat. The lieutenant asked about Rachel checkpoint, a military station about 20 miles south. Pat's smile didn't change, but her eyes did. Just a flicker. Like he'd said a word she recognized but didn't want to. She said she didn't know about that. Military doesn't usually tell us what they're doing. Suggested they try the sheriff's office down the road. Asked if they were looking for something. His voice sounded like tires on gravel. The lieutenant said Rachel checkpoint. The old man took a drag from his cigarette, let the smoke out slow. "No such thing," he said. The sergeant asked if he was sure. The old man said he'd been there 40 years. Knew every rock and cactus within 50 miles. No checkpoints south of town. Not now. Not ever. The lieutenant asked about recent setups. New construction. The old man shook his head. You boys are asking the wrong questions. Nothing new out here. Nothing old either. Done with them. The lieutenant and sergeant walked back to the vehicles. The private asked if they found anything. Dead end, the lieutenant said. Let's move. But as they climbed back in, the old man was still watching. His cigarette glowed like a tiny eye. He raised a hand, not a wave, just a lift of fingers, a gesture that could have meant goodbye, or could have meant something else. The convoy left Rachel in the rearview mirror, rolling north toward the final destination. The map sat between the lieutenant and sergeant, folded but not forgotten. That blue marker glared up from the paper like an accusation. Someone drew that, the sergeant said after a while. Yeah. Someone issued this map to us. Yeah. And no one knows what we're talking about. Yeah. Mike at lieutenant. Me neither. Eden, we tenant. Me neither. The corporal clicked his tongue 3 times fast. The sergeant didn't even yell at him. They delivered the supplies without incident. The forward team took the equipment, signed the forms, waved them off. Standard procedure. By the time they turned around for the return trip, the sun was starting its slow descent. Temperature dropped. Shadows stretched long. The desert took on that golden hour look that makes you forget how hostile it is. They passed through Rachel again. Quiet. The little Allen looked closed. The old man was gone from the porch. The town felt like a photograph, flat and still. Should we stop again? The sergeant asked. No, the lieutenant said. They pushed through. Highway 375 stretched south, empty and indifferent. The checkpoints came and went. Each time they stopped, the lieutenant asked the soldiers on duty about Rachel checkpoint. Each time they gave him the same confused look, said they'd never heard of it. You sure you're not thinking of a different route? One asked. Positive. The soldier shrugged. Maps get weird sometimes. Or printer errors. Yeah, the lieutenant said. Probably. But he kept watching the odometer, kept looking for the spot where Rachel checkpoint should have been. And when they crossed it, right at the mileage where the blue marker said it would be, the air in the Humvee went cold. Just for a second. Like someone had opened a freezer door in the back seat. The corporal felt it too. He glanced at the lieutenant, eyes wide. The lieutenant told him to keep his eyes on the road. The corporal faced forward. The sergeant sat perfectly still, map on his lap, staring straight ahead. Something's wrong with this place, he said quietly. It's just desert, the lieutenant said. No, the sergeant said. It's not. They drove. The sun dropped behind the mountains. The sky went orange, then purple, then black. Stars came out, more than you'd ever see near a city, the kind of stars that make you feel small and temporary. The corporal turned on the headlights. The road became a tunnel through the dark. The desert rolled past. Invisible now except for what the headlights carved out. The lieutenant kept his eyes forward, tried not to think about checkpoints that don't exist, maps that smell like fresh ink, cold air that comes from nowhere. Or when you're driving through empty land in the dark and someone tells you a place isn't real but you've got proof in your lap that says it is, you start wondering, what else isn't real? What else got deleted? What else is waiting out there in the places the map won't admit to? The sergeant folded the map and tucked it in his pocket. I'm keeping this, he said. Why? The lieutenant asked. Evidence, the sergeant said, in case someone asks later. Asks what, where we went, and why we came back with questions. The lieutenant didn't argue. They drove. The stars watched. The desert kept its secrets. And somewhere behind them in a spot that officially didn't exist, Rachel checkpoint sat on a map that shouldn't have been printed, marked in blue ink that smelled too fresh, waiting for a convoy that would never stop. They rolled into Nellis at 2200 hours, tired, dusty, done. They parked the vehicles, filed the reports, turned in the gear, standard end of mission procedure. The lieutenant signed off on the convoy log and handed it to the duty officer. Any issues? The officer asked. The lieutenant hesitated. The sergeant stood beside him, map still in his pocket. No issues, the lieutenant said. The duty officer nodded and filed the paperwork. Good run. Get some rest. They walked out into the night. The base was quiet. Lights glowing in the distance. Sound of engines idling somewhere beyond the motor pool. The sergeant pulled the map from his pocket, looked at it under a streetlight. The blue marker for Rachel checkpoint was still there. Clear, dark, fresh. Tomorrow, the sergeant said. I'm going to supply and asking who issued this. Think they'll tell you, the lieutenant asked. No, but I'm going to ask anyway. They parted ways. The lieutenant went back to his quarters, showered, tried to sleep. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw that stretch of highway, that empty spot where something should have been, that cold air, that marker on a map that no one admitted existed. And he wondered what happens to the places we delete, where they go, whether they're really gone or just waiting, marked in blue ink on maps that shouldn't exist, for convoys that ask the wrong questions. Morning came too early. The alarm went off at 5:30. The lieutenant stared at the ceiling for 10 minutes, trying to convince himself yesterday made sense. The convoy, the missing checkpoint, the map that smelled like ink, the cold air that came from nowhere. He ran it through his head like a checklist, looking for the place where logic broke down. He couldn't find it. Everything had happened exactly the way he remembered. That was the problem. He dressed, grabbed coffee from the mess hall that tasted like someone's regret, headed to his office. The base was waking up around him, soldiers jogging in formation, distant sound of engines turning over, smell of diesel and morning cold, normal. Everything was normal except the question sitting in his chest like a stone. Eyes had that red edge you get when you lie in bed thinking instead of resting. He held the map in both hands. "Lieutenant," he said, "we need to talk." They went inside. The lieutenant sat behind his desk. The sergeant stayed standing, map spread across his palms. "I couldn't sleep," he said. "Neither could I. I kept thinking about that checkpoint, about how it's on the map but nobody said it exists, about how the paper smells wrong, about that cold air we felt. Yeah, so I got up at 4 and went to supply, caught the night shift guy before he clocked out, asked him about map distribution." The lieutenant leaned forward, and, standard procedure. Maps are printed at the base print shop 2 weeks before issue. They come from the cartography section. Digital files get converted to print. Each convoy gets a fresh map, dated and logged. Our map was signed out at 05:45 yesterday morning. "Okay," the lieutenant said. "So someone made a mistake in the digital file." That's what I thought. The sergeant set the map on the desk, so I went to cartography, woke up the specialist on duty. He was not happy, but I showed him the map and asked where the digital file came from. The sergeant paused. His jaw worked like he was chewing on something he didn't want to swallow, and the lieutenant prompted. He checked the system, the sergeant said, pulled up the file dated February 2007, the file we supposedly used. "Lieutenant, Rachel checkpoint isn't on the digital file. It's not in the system, never was." The coffee in the lieutenant's stomach went cold. Then, where did it come from? That's what the specialist asked. The sergeant continued. He looked at the map under a magnifying glass, said the blue marker looks like it was drawn after the initial print. Said the ink composition is different, darker, fresher, like someone took a pen and added it by hand. The lieutenant picked up the map. In the daylight streaming through his office window, the blue marker did look different. The other checkpoints were lighter, more faded. Rachel checkpoint stood out, bold and dark. He touched it with his finger. Still smelled like ink. "Who would add a checkpoint by hand?" he asked. "I don't know," the sergeant said, "but it gets weirder." "How?" The specialist ran the map through the scanner, took a digital photo. When he compared it to the issued file, everything matched except Rachel checkpoint. And when he tried to scan just the blue marker, the scanner glitched. Glitched how? Wouldn't capture it. Kept throwing an error. Said the file was corrupted. He tried 3 times. Same result. Finally gave up and told me to bring it to his supervisor in the morning. The lieutenant set the map down. His hand felt strange, like it had been holding something too cold for too long. "You think someone tampered with our map? I think someone added that checkpoint. I think someone wanted us to look for it. I just don't know why." A knock at the door. They both turned. The corporal stuck his head in, pale face, curious. "Sir, Sarge, am I interrupting? Come in," the lieutenant said. The corporal stepped inside, hands in his pockets. "Couldn't sleep last night. Kept thinking about that drive. About that spot where the checkpoint should have been." "Yeah," the sergeant said. "We all did. So I went to the library. Did some research on Highway 375. Thought maybe there was something about that area. History, accidents, whatever. Find anything?" the lieutenant asked. "Maybe." The corporal pulled a printout from his pocket, unfolded it, set it on the desk next to the map. For you was a news article from 1989. The headline read, Military Convoy Disappears Near Rachel. 5 soldiers missing. The lieutenant picked it up and read. The article was short, vague. A supply convoy had been traveling north on Highway 375 in March 1989. 4 vehicles. 12 soldiers. They'd checked in at their last known checkpoint and never arrived at their destination. Search parties found the vehicles abandoned 20 miles south of Rachel. No soldiers, no signs of struggle, no explanation. The military had classified the incident. The article ended with speculation about Area 51 and government cover-ups. March 1989, the lieutenant said quietly. 18 years ago, almost to the day. The sergeant looked at the article, then at the lieutenant. Same route we drove, same number of vehicles, same convoy size. Could be coincidence, the lieutenant said. But his voice didn't believe it. Could be, the corporal said. Except I found 2 more. He pulled out 2 more printouts, another article from 1995. Another from 2001. Both described military convoys that had gone missing on Highway 375 near Rachel. Both in March. Both the same convoy configuration. Both vehicles found abandoned. Soldiers never seen again. 3 incidents, the sergeant said. 18 years apart. 6 years apart. If the pattern holds, the next one should be 2007. This year. Silence filled the office like water filling a cup. They all looked at each other, then at the articles. You think someone's trying to warn us, the corporal asked. Or mark us, the sergeant said. The lieutenant stood up, walked to the window. The base stretched out below, morning sun glinting off metal and glass. Normal. Everything looked so goddamn normal. We need to report this. Report what? The sergeant asked. That a checkpoint that doesn't exist was drawn on our map by someone we can't identify. That there's a pattern of disappearances that might be connected. That we felt cold air on an empty highway. Yes. They'll laugh us out of the office, the sergeant said. Or worse, they'll think we're trying to get out of future duty. You know how this works, Lieutenant. Weird reports get weird reputations. He was right. The lieutenant hated that he was right. So what do you suggest? We dig. We find out what happened to those convoys. We find out who added that checkpoint to our map. We figure this out before we get orders to drive that route again. And if we get orders tomorrow? The lieutenant asked. The sergeant didn't answer. He just looked at the map. The door opened without a knock. A major stepped in. Crisp uniform. Tight jaw. The kind of officer who expected salutes and obedience in that order. They stood at attention. At ease, the major said. He glanced at the map on the desk, at the articles, at their faces. I need you in my office in 10 minutes. Bring the sergeant. Yes, sir. He left without another word. The door closed. That can't be good, the corporal said. Dismissed. Keep this between us for now. The corporal nodded and left. The sergeant folded the map and tucked it under his arm. You think someone told him. About what? The lieutenant said. We haven't filed a report, the cartography specialist. Maybe he mentioned it. Maybe. They walked to the major's office in silence. The base felt bigger in daylight, more exposed. The lieutenant kept thinking about those convoys, 12 soldiers each, 3 incidents, 36 people gone, just gone. And now someone had drawn a checkpoint on their map in the same spot where they disappeared. The major's office was on the 2nd floor of the admin building. They knocked. He barked for them to enter. They did. He sat behind his desk, hands folded, face unreadable. Sit. I received an interesting call this morning, the major said, from the cartography specialist. He says you showed him a map with an unauthorized checkpoint marked on it. Says the map came from yesterday's convoy run on Highway 375. Yes, sir. He also says the checkpoint doesn't exist in any official capacity, and that you've been asking questions about it. That's correct, sir. The major leaned back in his chair. Explain. The lieutenant did. Told him about the convoy, about the map, about the blue marker for Rachel checkpoint. How Nellis Base said no such station existed. About the fresh ink smell and the scanner glitch. He kept it factual, kept it simple. The sergeant added details where needed. When they finished, the major sat quiet for a long moment. Then he opened a drawer in his desk, pulled out a folder, set it on the desk between them. 3 convoys have gone missing on that route, the major said. 1989, 1995, 2001, all in March, all near Rachel. The incidents were classified because we never found the soldiers, and we never found an explanation that made sense. The official story is training accidents classified for family privacy. You know about them, the lieutenant said. I was briefed when I took this command. Part of the job. Every co at Nellis gets the file. We're told to be aware but not to publicize. Bad for morale, bad for recruitment. What happened to them, the sergeant asked. No one knows. Search parties found the vehicles abandoned. No damage, no signs of struggle. Soldiers just gone. Some of the vehicles still had engines running. Radios on. Food half eaten. Like everyone decided to walk away at the same time and never came back. The lieutenant's throat felt dry, and the map. The checkpoint marker. The major opened the folder. Inside were 3 maps. Old and yellowed with age. He spread them on the desk. Each map showed Highway 375. Each map had a blue marker. Rachel checkpoint, same location, same fresh-looking ink. Each convoy had this on their issued map. Each time the checkpoint wasn't in the official file. Each time it appeared by hand. And each time the convoy that received the map disappeared. The sergeant whispered something under his breath. You're the 4th convoy to receive this map, the major said. He looked at the lieutenant with something in his eyes that was hard to read. Concern, maybe, or warning. But you're the 1st convoy to come back. The office felt smaller suddenly, the air thicker. The lieutenant looked at the 3 old maps with their identical blue markers. Thought about the soldiers who'd followed them into nothing. Why, he asked. Why us? Why a checkpoint that doesn't exist? I don't know. The investigation teams found nothing. No radiation, no chemical spills, no enemy action, just empty desert and abandoned vehicles. The case files are still open technically, but no one's worked them in years. Someone's marking convoys, the sergeant said. Someone knows which route we're taking and adds the checkpoint before we roll out. That would mean someone in supply or cartography. We've investigated every time, never found who did it. Whoever it is, they're careful. They don't leave prints, don't leave traces. The maps just show up with the marker already on them. And you let us drive that route, the lieutenant said. He didn't mean for it to sound like an accusation, but it came out that way. The major's jaw tightened. We can't shut down Highway 375 because of disappearances we can't explain. The route is strategic. We use it regularly. And until yesterday, every convoy that received the marked map vanished. You didn't. That changes things. Changes them how? The sergeant asked. It means maybe the pattern's broken. Or maybe you got lucky. Or maybe whoever's doing this is trying something different. He closed the folder and pushed it toward the lieutenant. I'm keeping you off Highway 375 for the foreseeable future. Your convoy detail is reassigned to local operations. And I want you to keep this quiet. No talking to other soldiers, no posting online, no discussing it off base. You're covering it up. I'm protecting my soldiers. If word gets out that convoys are disappearing and we don't know why, panic spreads. Rumors start. Someone does something stupid trying to play hero or ghost hunter. I won't have that. What about the families of the missing soldiers? They've been told. Training accidents. Bodies never recovered. It's not ideal, but it's what we have. The lieutenant wanted to argue. Wanted to push back. But he could see in the major's face that he'd had this argument with himself 100 times already. He'd made his choice. Right or wrong, he'd made it. Understood, sir. One more thing. The major pulled out a clear evidence bag. Inside was a map. Their map. The one with Rachel checkpoint. I'm taking this into custody. It's evidence now. You don't discuss it. You don't photograph it. You don't talk about what was on it. Clear. Crystal, sir. They stood. The major dismissed them. They walked out into the hallway and down the stairs in silence. When they hit the ground floor, the sergeant looked at the lieutenant. He's scared. Yeah. He doesn't know what's happening either. No. And we're just supposed to pretend everything's normal. That's the order. The sergeant nodded slowly. They walked back toward their section. The morning had turned hot, sun climbing higher, base humming with activity. Everything looked normal. Everything was normal, except for the fact that 36 soldiers had vanished driving the same route they'd driven yesterday. Except for the fact that someone kept marking convoys with a checkpoint that led nowhere. Except for the fact that they'd come back and the others hadn't. You feel that cold air yesterday? The sergeant said. It wasn't a question. Yeah. Right at the coordinates where the checkpoint should have been. Yeah. What do you think that was? The lieutenant didn't answer. He didn't have an answer. They walked. The desert stretched beyond the base fence, endless and empty. Highway 375 ran through it somewhere out there, a ribbon of asphalt through nothing. And somewhere on that highway, in a spot that didn't officially exist, Rachel checkpoint waited, marked on maps that shouldn't have it, invisible to everyone except the convoys that never came home. The lieutenant thought about the blue marker, about the fresh ink, about the scanner that wouldn't capture it, about the cold that came from nowhere. And he wondered what they'd really driven through yesterday, what had been watching them from that empty spot on the map. The sergeant stopped walking. The sergeant stopped walking. I need to tell you something. What? When we passed that spot yesterday, when the cold air came, I saw something. Saw what? In the side mirror, just for a second. A shape on the road behind us. Tall, standing in the middle of the highway. It wasn't there when I looked back, but I saw it, clear as day. The lieutenant's skin went cold. You didn't mention it. I know. I thought maybe I was seeing things. Thought maybe it was heat shimmer or a trick of the light. But last night I kept seeing it in my head. It was too clear to be a mistake. What did it look like? Like a person, but wrong. Too tall. Standing too still. And it was looking right at us. I could feel it looking. They stood there in the morning sun. 2 soldiers on a military base, surrounded by fences in routine and order. Talking about something that watched convoys from a place that didn't exist. Did anyone else see it? The lieutenant asked. I don't know. I didn't ask. Didn't want to sound crazy. Ask them. See what they say. The sergeant nodded. They started walking again, but the conversation sat between them like a third person. Something had been there. Something had watched them. And 36 soldiers before them had stopped at that spot and never left. They found the corporal in the motor pool checking tire pressure on one of the HEMUCs. He looked up when they approached, wrench in hand. Sarge, Lieutenant. Everything okay? Yesterday when we passed the spot where Rachel checkpoint should have been, the sergeant said, did you see anything unusual? The corporal's face went careful. Like what? Anything. Shapes, shadows, movement. The corporal set down the wrench. He looked at his hands, then at them. I saw someone standing on the road, he said quietly, in my rear view. Just for a second. Thought it was my imagination. What did it look like? The lieutenant asked. Tall, real tall, wearing something dark. Just standing there in the middle of the highway. When I blinked, it was gone. The sergeant and lieutenant looked at each other. 3 of them. 3 people who saw the same thing. Don't talk about this, the lieutenant said. Not to anyone. Orders from the major. Humming something under his breath. He grinned when he saw them. Hey, Sarge, Lieutenant, what's up? Quick question. Yesterday's convoy, anything weird happen? Anything you noticed? His grin faded. Like what? Anything out of the ordinary? The private thought about it. Well, he said slowly, there was this one moment. We were driving through that empty stretch and I could have sworn I saw someone standing on the side of the road, way out there in the dirt, just standing, watching us go by. What did they look like? The lieutenant asked. Couldn't tell. Too far away. But they were tall, very tall. And they didn't move, not even a little. I mentioned it to Corporal Davis, and he said it was probably a signpost or something. Probably, the lieutenant said, but it wasn't. They all knew it wasn't. 4 soldiers, 4 sightings, same description, too tall, too still, watching. And none of them had said anything until now, because who wants to be the one who sounds crazy? Thanks. Keep it to yourself. Yeah, sure, sir. The private went back to cleaning his rifle, but his hands moved slower now, less certain. He'd quit 3 months ago, but kept an emergency pack in his pocket. This apparently qualified as an emergency. 4 people, he said through the smoke. 4 separate sightings, same thing. Yeah, and 36 soldiers who saw it before us didn't come back. Yeah, what the hell did we drive past, Lieutenant? The lieutenant didn't answer. He didn't have an answer. They stood in the Nevada sun and smoked and thought about tall shapes on empty highways. About checkpoints that existed only on maps. About cold air that came from nowhere. About blue markers drawn in fresh ink by hands they couldn't trace. They thought about soldiers who vanished between one breath and the next, leaving nothing behind but running engines and half-eaten meals, and they wondered when it would come back for them. 6 weeks of normal duty, normal routines, normal everything. They ran convoys on other routes, maintained vehicles, filed paperwork, did everything soldiers do when they're trying not to think about the thing they're not supposed to talk about. But they thought about it, all of them. You could see it in the way the corporal would pause mid-sentence and stare at nothing, in the way the sergeant kept a small notebook now and wrote down details he was afraid he'd forget, in the way the private stopped humming. He used to hum all the time. Now he was quiet, like the music had gone out of him. The lieutenant tried to focus on the work, tried to convince himself that the major was right. that the pattern was broken, that they'd gotten lucky, and that was the end of it. But at night, when the base went quiet and the desert pressed against the windows, he'd think about that tall figure standing on the highway. Too still, too tall, watching, and he'd wonder when it would come for them. April brought heat that made March look kind. The desert turned into an oven. They moved through it like meat being cooked slow. Training exercises, supply runs, the usual grind. They stayed off Highway 375, orders. But you could feel it out there, that empty stretch of road, that spot where Rachel Checkpoint wasn't. It pulled at the edge of your thoughts like a thread you couldn't stop picking at. The sergeant found the lieutenant in the mess hall one afternoon, sat down across from him with a tray he didn't touch. "I've been having dreams," he said quietly. "About what?" "I'm standing there right at the coordinates and there's a building, not a big one, just a small concrete structure with a flag, a checkpoint, real, solid, and someone's inside. Who? I don't know, but they're waiting, and they know I'm there, and when I try to walk away I can't, my boots are stuck. Like the ground won't let me leave." The lieutenant set down his fork. "It's just a dream, Sarge, is it? Because the corporal told me he's having the same one. Same checkpoint, same feeling, same stuck boots. You talked to him about this. He came to me. Said he keeps waking up at 3 a.m. thinking he's late for checkpoint duty. But there is no checkpoint duty. There never was." The lieutenant felt something cold move through his chest. What about the private? Haven't asked him yet. But you should see the way he looks at maps now. Like they're lying to him. They sat in silence. Around them, the mess hall hummed with conversation and clattering trays, the kind of noise that means everything's normal, but they weren't normal anymore. They'd driven through something, or past something, or into something, and it had left a mark they couldn't see but could definitely feel. "I want to go back," the sergeant said. "Absolutely not. Just to look, just to see. Maybe if we go back without orders, without a convoy, maybe we'll see something different. Maybe we'll understand. The major ordered us to stay off that route. He doesn't know what we saw. He knows about the disappearances, sure, but he doesn't know about the figure, about the dreams, about what it feels like to know something's watching you from a place that isn't supposed to exist. No, we follow orders. We stay away. That's how we survive this." The sergeant looked at the lieutenant for a long time. Then he picked up his tray and left without eating. That night, the lieutenant couldn't sleep. He lay in his bunk and stared at the ceiling, thought about checkpoints that weren't there, about maps with fresh ink, about soldiers who vanished between breaths, and he wondered if staying away was really survival, or just a slow way of waiting for whatever was out there to come and collect what it was owed. At 0300, he gave up on sleep, got dressed, walked the base perimeter. The night was clear and cold. Stars looked like someone had thrown broken glass across black paper. He walked past the motor pool, past the admin building, past the barracks where his soldiers slept or didn't sleep. He found the private sitting on the steps outside his barracks. He had his rifle across his knees and was staring at the fence line. "Can't sleep either," the lieutenant said. The private looked up. In the starlight, he looked younger than 19. "Sir, can I ask you something? Go ahead. Do you think we're haunted?" The lieutenant could have said no, could have told him it was just stress, just the brain playing tricks after a weird experience, could have done the officer thing and reassured him that everything was fine. But he was tired of lying. "Yeah," he said. "I think maybe we are." The private nodded slowly. "I keep seeing it. That figure on the road. It shows up in reflections now, in windows, in mirrors. Just for a second, then it's gone, but I know it's there. I know it's watching. Have you told anyone else?" "But Tuesday Habby Cha to tell Bia now." "I know it's watching. Have you told anyone else?" "It's... oh... it's besieged anyone. It's watching. And even if I could talk, who'd believe me? I barely believe me." The lieutenant sat down next to him on the steps. They watched the fence line together. The desert beyond it was a dark mass, endless and patient. "What do you think it wants?" the private asked. "Do you think it'll come for us?" "I don't know." But the lieutenant thought about those 36 soldiers who'd seen what they'd seen and never came home, thought about abandoned vehicles with engines still running, thought about the pattern every 6 years, every March, and they'd broken it by coming back. Maybe that made them safe. Or maybe it just meant the pattern had changed. May came. The heat became unbearable. They ran their routes, did their jobs, maintained the facade of normal, but you could feel the tension in their small group. The 4 of them who'd been in that convoy, They moved through the days like people waiting for test results, waiting to see if something bad was growing inside them that they couldn't cut out. The corporal started taking pictures, not of anything specific, just snapshots, the desert, or the roads. He said he wanted to document things in case of what he didn't say but they all knew. The sergeant kept his notebook, filled it with observations, patterns, questions. He showed the lieutenant once, page after page of tight handwriting, dates, times, coordinates, the names of the missing soldiers from the previous convoys. He found their names somehow, listed them all, 36 names in 3 columns, and at the bottom in different ink their names, the 4 of them, like he was preparing the next entry. "Don't show that to anyone," the lieutenant told him, "or I won't. But someone should know, someone should remember. If we," he stopped, didn't finish, didn't need to. The private got quieter, stopped smiling. He did his job well, followed orders, never complained, but the light in him had dimmed. Like someone had turned down the brightness on who he used to be. And the lieutenant started sleeping with his boots on. Old habit from deployment. You sleep ready so you can move fast when things go wrong. He told himself it was just being prepared. But really, he knew something was coming. Or he just didn't know when. The answer came on a Tuesday. They were in the motor pool. Routine maintenance on the Hemo-Vs, changing oil, checking fluids, the grunt work that keeps machines running. The lieutenant was under the hood of Vehicle 1 when Corporal Davis came running up. Out of breath. "Lieutenant," he said, "we've got a problem." The lieutenant straightened, wiped his hands on a rag. "What kind of problem?" "The private. He's gone." The world tilted. "Gone how?" "He was in the supply room 10 minutes ago, logged in to grab parts. I went to check on him and the room was empty. Door still open. His rifle's on the floor. It's like he just vanished." The lieutenant ran. The sergeant and corporal followed. They hit the supply room and it was exactly like Davis said. Door open, lights on. The private's rifle lying on the concrete floor. His clipboard sat on a shelf. Pen still clipped to it, like he'd been interrupted mid-task and simply stopped existing. "Search the building," the lieutenant ordered. "Every room, every closet. Move." They searched top to bottom, called his name, checked every space a person could hide or fall or get stuck. Nothing. The private was gone. The lieutenant radioed base security. They locked down the facility and ran a full search. 40 soldiers combing every building, every vehicle, every square foot of the base. They searched for 6 hours. The sun set, searchlights came on. They kept looking. Nothing. The major called the lieutenant to his office at 2200 hours. The lieutenant walked in and knew from his face that he'd made the connection. "Sit down." The lieutenant sat. Private was on that convoy. The one from March. Highway 375. "Yes, sir." And now he's disappeared from a locked facility in the middle of the day with no sign of forced exit or struggle. "Yes, sir." The major leaned back in his chair. He looked tired, old. They came back, and then one by one they vanished afterward. The lieutenant felt his throat go tight. "Sir, we don't know." "Yes, we do. The pattern was never about the highway. It was about the convoy, about the soldiers who drove past that checkpoint. They come back thinking they're safe, and then whatever's out there comes for them." "How do you know?" The major opened his desk and pulled out an old file. Yellowed paper. Faded ink. "I lied to you before. The 3 previous convoys. They did come back, all of them, filed their reports, turned in their gear, went back to duty. And then over the next 3 months the soldiers disappeared. One by one, from the base, from their quarters, from locked rooms with no exits, just gone. The room felt too small. Why didn't you tell us? Because I hoped the pattern was broken. I hoped that maybe this time would be different, that maybe you'd beaten it. He closed the file. I was wrong. How long do we have? The lieutenant asked. Based on previous patterns, 3 months from the date of the convoy. You drove Highway 375 on March 18th. It's now May 20th. 2 months. Or if the pattern holds, you have 4 weeks, maybe less. The lieutenant stood up. His legs felt distant, like they belonged to someone else. What do we do? I don't know. The previous investigations found nothing, no trace, no leads, no bodies. The soldiers just stopped existing, like they were erased. There has to be something. There isn't. We've tried everything. The only option is to wait and hope. Hope for what? That you're the exception, that whatever took the private stops with him. But they both knew it wouldn't. The pattern was clear. 4 soldiers had driven past Rachel checkpoint, but 1 was already gone. 3 remained. The lieutenant walked back to his quarters in a daze. The base felt different now, less solid. Like reality had gone thin in places and something on the other side was pressing through. The sergeant and corporal were waiting outside his door. We heard. "It's coming for us," the corporal said. His voice shook. "Isn't it? Whatever we saw, it's coming. We don't know that." But the lieutenant didn't believe it. "We need to go back," the sergeant said. "Back to the checkpoint. Back to where it started. Maybe if we face it." "Face what?" the lieutenant said. "A checkpoint that doesn't exist. A marker on a map. We don't even know what we're dealing with. We know enough. We know it's real. We know it's hunting us. And we know running didn't save the private. He was right. The lieutenant hated that he was right. We go back, but we do it smart. We bring gear, weapons, cameras. We document everything. And we do it during leave time, off the books. If the major finds out, he'll stop us." "When?" the corporal asked. "This weekend. We put in for 72-hour passes. We drive Highway 375. We find that spot and we get answers." "Or we disappear," the sergeant said. "Or we disappear." They got the passes. Told the duty officer they were heading to Vegas for some NR. He barely looked up from his paperwork when he signed off. They packed light, civilian clothes, a civilian vehicle borrowed from a friend off base. No uniforms. No military gear. Just 3 guys taking a drive through the desert. They left Friday at dawn. The sky was that perfect blue that makes you forget the desert once you're dead. They drove north on Highway 375, and the road felt different this time, less empty, more aware, like it recognized them. The sergeant rode shotgun with his notebook open. The corporal drove, silent, hands tight on the wheel. The lieutenant sat in back with a digital camera and a GPS unit. They'd marked the exact coordinates where Rachel checkpoint should have been. 20 miles, the sergeant said. They drove. The mountains stayed distant. The scrub brush rolled past. The heat built. 10 miles. The lieutenant's hands started to sweat. He checked the camera, checked the GPS. Everything worked. Everything was fine. But the air in the car felt thin, hard to breathe. 5 miles. The corporal slowed the car. They rolled forward at 30 miles per hour. Every set of eyes scanning, looking for what they didn't know. A building, a sign, a shape, anything. 1 mile. The temperature dropped, just like before. The air went cold. Her hair on the lieutenant's arms stood up. The corporal's breath came out in a small fog. Nothing but dirt and scrub. Same as always. But the cold was intense now, like they'd driven into a freezer. "Stop the car." The corporal pulled over. They got out. The moment the lieutenant's boots hit the ground, he felt it. A presence. Something standing just out of sight. Something watching. The 3 of them stood in the triangle, backs to the car, eyes scanning the horizon. Nothing moved. Nothing made a sound. Even the wind had stopped. "Take pictures," the lieutenant said. The corporal raised the camera and started shooting. Click, 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 click. The shutter sounded too loud in the silence. The sergeant walked forward, toward the spot where the checkpoint should have been. He stopped about 20 feet from the car and knelt down. "Lieutenant," he called, "you need to see this." The lieutenant walked over. The corporal followed, still taking pictures. In the dirt barely visible were marks, not footprints, not tire tracks, depressions, like something heavy had stood there for a very long time. And in the center of the depressions, scratched into the hardpan, were letters. RATHEL. "It was here," the sergeant said. "The checkpoint was here." "But where did it go?" the corporal asked. The lieutenant opened his mouth to answer and the world tilted. The air shimmered. The temperature spiked from freezing to hot in an instant. And there, standing 50 feet away where nothing had been a second before, was the tall figure. Same as before. Too tall, too still, wearing something dark that might have been a uniform or might have been something else. It stood in the middle of the highway and looked at them with eyes they couldn't see but could definitely feel. "Don't run," the lieutenant said quietly. "Nobody moves." The figure started walking toward them, slow, each step deliberate. It covered ground faster than it should have, like distance didn't apply to it the same way it applied to them. The sergeant raised his camera and took a picture. The flash went off. The figure stopped, tilted its head, then kept coming. "Get in the car," the lieutenant said. "Now." They ran, piled into the vehicle. The corporal hit the ignition and the engine turned over but didn't catch. He tried again. Nothing. "Come on," the corporal said. "Come on, come on, come on." The figure was 30 feet away now. 20. The lieutenant could see it better, could see that it was wearing a uniform, old style, like the kind they issued in the 80s. Could see that where its face should have been, there was just smooth skin. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just blank flesh stretched over bone. The corporal threw it in reverse, and they shot backward. The figure lunged forward with impossible speed. Its hand, if you could call it a hand, slammed against the hood of the car. The metal shrieked, dented inward like paper. "Drive!" the sergeant shouted. The corporal spun the wheel. They fishtailed, found traction, accelerated forward. The figure stood in the road behind them, shrinking in the rearview mirror. And then it was gone, just gone, like it had never been there. They drove, didn't talk, didn't stop. Just drove until Highway 375 became other roads. And other roads became the base, and the base became their quarters, and they could finally breathe again. They downloaded the photos that night. The corporal's hands shook as he plugged the camera into his laptop. The images loaded one by one. Desert, sky, empty road, the letters scratched in the dirt, and then the tall figure, clear as day. Standing in the middle of the highway, its face a blank expanse of skin, its hand reaching toward the camera. "We got it," the corporal said. "We got proof." "Proof of what?" the lieutenant asked. "That something's hunting us. We already knew that. Proof that it's real, that we're not crazy, that whatever took the private, whatever took those other soldiers, it's real, and it can be seen. And what do we do with that?" None of them had an answer. That was 3 days ago. Now the sergeant was gone. Vanished this morning from the mess hall. 1 minute he was getting coffee. The next his mug was on the floor, and he was nowhere. Just like the private, just like the others. It's just the lieutenant and corporal now. 2 soldiers waiting for something they can't stop and can't fight. They've tried everything. Stayed on base, stayed together, stayed alert. Doesn't matter. It comes when it wants, takes what it's owed. The lieutenant thinks he understands now. The checkpoint was never real. It was bait. A mark on a map to draw them to that spot, to make them see, to make them recognized. And once you've seen it, once you've been marked, it doesn't let go. It follows you home. It waits, and then it collects. The pattern isn't broken. They didn't escape. They just delayed the inevitable. If you're reading this, if somehow this gets out, remember, don't trust maps with fresh ink. Don't drive past places that shouldn't exist. And if you ever see a checkpoint called Rachel on Highway 375, don't stop. Don't slow down. Don't acknowledge it. Because once it knows you've seen it, you're already gone. You just don't know it yet. The corporal is gone now, too. Disappeared from his bunk last night. His boots were still there, laces tied, sitting at the foot of his bed like he just stepped out of them and walked away. The lieutenant is the last one. He can feel it watching him. Every reflection, every shadow, every window. It's there, waiting, patient. It knows he can't run, knows he can't hide. Maybe tomorrow, maybe tonight, maybe in the next 5 minutes. It doesn't matter. The checkpoint was deleted from the official records, but it never forgot them. And now it's time to balance the books. The lieutenant writes this now because he knows what's coming. The corporal vanished 2 hours ago, stepped into the bathroom and never came out. Door was locked from the inside. When they broke it down, the room was empty. Just steam from the shower and his dog tags on the sink. The lieutenant is alone. Last one left from the convoy. He can feel it now, that presence. It's in the room with him, standing just behind where he can't quite see. He doesn't turn around, doesn't want to confirm what he already knows. The major came by an hour ago, told him to pack his things, said they were transferring him stateside, protective custody, like distance matters, like you can run from something that exists in the spaces between real and not real. The lieutenant refused, told him transfers won't help, told him the entity doesn't care about geography. It marked them on that highway, and now it's collecting, one by one. The major didn't argue, just left the transfer papers on the desk and walked out, looked back once. Like he was memorizing the lieutenant's face, like he knew this was the last time he'd see him. The lieutenant thinks about the private, about the sergeant, about the corporal, wonders where they went, if they're somewhere together, if they're anywhere at all, or if they just stopped existing, deleted like the checkpoint that started this. He thinks about all those soldiers before them. 36 names in the sergeant's notebook. 36 people who drove past something that shouldn't exist and paid for it. And now 4 more names to add to the list. The air is getting cold again. That same freezer cold from the highway. The lieutenant can see his breath. The lights are flickering. On, off, on, off. Something's moving in the corner. Tall, too tall. He still doesn't look. He keeps writing. Because someone needs to know. Someone needs to understand what happened here. That Rachel checkpoint is real. That it's marked on maps that shouldn't have it. that it draws you in with fresh blue ink and familiar lies. And once you've seen it, once you've driven past that empty spot and felt that cold and seen that figure, you're already gone. You just get a few weeks to pretend otherwise. The entity is right behind him now. He can feel it, can smell something like ozone and old copper, can hear something that might be breathing but probably isn't. His hands are shaking so hard he can barely hold the pen, but he keeps writing, keeps documenting, because this is all that's left, this testimony, this warning. Or if you're reading this, don't go looking for Rachel Checkpoint. Don't drive Highway 375 in March. Don't trust maps with markers that smell like fresh ink. And if you see something tall standing in the desert watching convoys pass, don't stop. Don't acknowledge it. Don't let it know you've seen it, because once it marks you, you're on borrowed time. The pattern doesn't break, it just waits. Patient and inevitable. The lieutenant sets down the pen. The cold is everywhere now. The lights have stopped flickering. Just darkness and that presence pressing close. He finally turns around. And there it is, tall, faceless, wearing a uniform from a decade before he was born, standing close enough to touch. It reaches out one impossible hand. The lieutenant doesn't scream, doesn't run. There's nowhere left to go. The last thing he thinks about is that empty stretch of highway, that spot where Rachel Checkpoint wasn't. And he understands now. It was never deleted. It was always there, waiting in the spaces between what's real and what's possible, drawing in convoys every 6 years, marking soldiers, collecting debts. And it will keep doing this, keep marking maps, keep waiting on that highway, keep taking soldiers one by one until someone stops it. But nobody will. Because nobody believes, because checkpoints that don't exist can't hurt you, because patterns are just coincidences, because the desert keeps its secrets. The entity's hand touches his shoulder, the cold burns. Everything goes white, then black, then nothing. The supply room is empty when they find it. Just the lieutenant's pen on the floor, his notebook open to the last page, and written in handwriting that gets shakier with each line a final message. Warn them, tell them about Rachel, tell them not to stop, tell them the sentence doesn't finish. The rest is just empty page. They file it as another disappearance, another training accident, another classified incident that families will never understand. The major burns the notebook, burns the photos, burns everything connected to Highway 375 and Rachel Checkpoint and the convoy that came back but didn't survive. He files the reports, marks the case closed. And 6 years from now, when March comes around, someone will print a new map. And somewhere in the cartography files, a blue marker will appear, fresh ink, dark and clear. Rachel Checkpoint, 20 miles south of Rachel, Nevada. And another convoy will be assigned that route. And they'll drive past that empty spot. And they'll feel that cold. And they'll see that figure. And the pattern will repeat. Because some debts never get paid. They just get passed on. Highway 375 is still there. Still empty. Still waiting. And if you ever find yourself driving it in March, and you see a checkpoint marker on your map that smells like fresh ink, remember this story. Remember the lieutenant and his soldiers. Remember what happened to them. And whatever you do, don't stop. Just drive. Keep driving. And pray it doesn't follow you home.